I never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet. My name's Jake, and I just found out my wife of 3 years, Vanessa, has been cheating on me with my rich Uncle Brad. And get this, I found out at our fucking wedding renewal ceremony. I know what you're thinking, wedding renewal after only 3 years? What's up with that? Well, Vanessa had been pushing for it for months. Said she wanted to reaffirm our love and start fresh. Now I know why. Looking back, there were signs. Late nights at work, mysterious text messages, and a sudden interest in golf, Uncle Brad's favorite hobby. But I was too blind to see it. Too in love. Too stupid. The day of our renewal ceremony started like a dream. Vanessa looked stunning in her white dress, and I couldn't stop smiling. We had a small gathering of family and close friends at a picturesque vineyard. Uncle Brad was there, of course. He's always been the cool uncle, the one with the fancy cars and the fat wallet. Everything was perfect until the reception. Vanessa started hitting the champagne hard. I mean really hard. At first, I thought she was just celebrating, but then she got sloppy. She was laughing too loud, stumbling around, and kept disappearing for long stretches of time. I started to get worried, so I went looking for her. That's when I heard it, giggles and whispers coming from behind the catering tent. I peeked around the corner and, fuck, there they were. Vanessa, with her dress hiked up, kissing Uncle Brad like her life depended on it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My wife and my uncle. At our fucking wedding renewal. It was like some sick joke. I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, watching this nightmare unfold. Then Vanessa spotted me. Her eyes went wide and she pushed Brad away. Jake, baby, it's not what it looks like, she slurred, stumbling towards me. Not what it looks like. Was she fucking kidding me? I looked at Uncle Brad, who at least had the decency to look ashamed. He mumbled something about being sorry and quickly walked away. Vanessa reached for me, but I jerked away. Don't touch me, I hissed. Jake, please, she begged. I can explain. We were just talking and dash. Talking? I cut her off. With your tongue down his throat? She started crying then, big drunk tears smearing her makeup. It was a mistake. I love you, Jake. Only you. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed off, leaving her sobbing behind the catering tent. I needed a drink. Or 10. I made my way back to the reception, my head spinning. How long had this been going on? Was our entire marriage a lie? I grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the bar and started chugging it right there. My sister, Viola, noticed something was wrong and came over. Jake, what's going on? Where's Vanessa? I laughed bitterly. Oh, she's busy. Catching up with Uncle Brad. Viola looked confused. What do you mean? Just then, Vanessa stumbled back into the reception area, her dress disheveled and lipstick smeared. She spotted me and started wobbling over. Don't you dare, I growled, but she ignored me. Baby, please, she slurred, grabbing my arm. Let's talk about this. I yanked my arm away, causing her to lose her balance and fall flat on her ass. The music screeched to a halt, and suddenly all eyes were on us. Talk about what? I shouted, beyond caring who heard. How you've been fucking my uncle? The room went dead silent. I could feel everyone staring, but I didn't care. The truth was out and there was no going back. Vanessa burst into tears again, still sprawled on the floor. It's not like that, she wailed. It was just a mistake. My mom rushed over, trying to help Vanessa up. Honey, calm down. Let's talk about this privately. But I was beyond calming down. The whiskey and the rage were fueling me now. Oh, you want to talk privately? Like how you and Uncle Brad were talking behind the tent. Uncle Brad, who had been trying to blend into the background, suddenly became the center of attention. Aunt Karen, his wife, turned to him with a look of shock and disgust. Brad, what is he talking about? Before he could answer, I jumped in. Why don't you tell her, Uncle Brad? Tell everyone how you've been screwing my wife. The room erupted into chaos. Aunt Karen started screaming at Uncle Brad, my mom was trying to usher me and Vanessa out of the room, and the other guests were whispering and pointing. Vanessa, still crying, grabbed onto my leg. Jake, please. I love you. It didn't mean anything. I looked down at her, This woman I thought I knew, and felt nothing but disgust. How long? I asked coldly. She blinked up at me, mascara running down her face. How long have you been fucking him? Vanessa's face crumpled. She looked around, seemingly realizing for the first time that everyone was watching. Jake, please, not here, she whispered. But I was past caring about propriety. Answer the question, Vanessa. Long. She swallowed hard. It was just a few times. Maybe 6 months? 6 months. Half a year of lies. I felt like I was going to be sick. 6 fucking months? I roared. And you have the audacity to plan this renewal bullshit? Vanessa struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. I wanted to make things right. To recommit to you. I laughed bitterly. By screwing my uncle at the ceremony? Great job, Vanessa. Really stellar effort. Uncle Brad chose that moment to try and slink away. I spotted him and something in me snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged at him, tackling him to the ground. You son of a bitch! I yelled, my fist connecting with his face. She's half your age. What the fuck is wrong with you? It took 3 of my cousins to pull me off him. Uncle Brad scrambled away, blood pouring from his nose. Aunt Karen was sobbing in the corner, my mom looked horrified, and Vanessa just stood there, watching it all fall apart. As the chaos settled, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my dad, his face a mix of concern and disappointment. Son, let's get some air, he said firmly, steering me towards the exit. Once outside, the cool evening air hit me like a slap. I bent over, hands on my knees, trying not to throw up. Dad stood silently beside me, waiting. Finally, I straightened up and looked at him. Did you know? I asked, my voice hoarse. He shook his head. No, Jake. I had no idea. I nodded, relieved at least that my parents hadn't been in on this betrayal. What do I do now, Dad? He sighed heavily. That's something only you can decide, son. But whatever you choose, your mother and I are here for you. Just then, Vanessa came stumbling out, still crying. Jake, please. Can we talk? I'll explain everything. I turned to her, feeling suddenly very tired. Explain what, Vanessa? How you've been lying to me for months. How you thought renewing our vows would magically fix your guilt. She flinched at my words but pressed on. It wasn't like that. I was lonely. You were always working and Brad, he was there. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she seriously trying to blame me for her affair? I stared at Vanessa in disbelief. I was working to build a future for us. I shouted. While you were what? Getting lonely with my uncle? She reached for me but I stepped back. Jake, please. I made a mistake. We can work through this. I laughed bitterly. Work through this? You fucked my uncle for 6 months, Vanessa. You lied to my face every day. And now you're trying to blame me? My dad stepped between us. All right, that's enough. Vanessa, I think you should go inside and sober up. Jake needs some space. Vanessa looked like she wanted to argue, but then she just nodded and stumbled back inside, leaving me alone with my dad. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling lost. I can't believe this is happening. Dad put his hand on my shoulder. I know, son. It's a lot to process. Why don't you come stay with your mother and me tonight? You shouldn't be alone. I nodded, grateful for the offer. As we walked to his car, I could hear the murmur of voices from inside the venue. Our perfect day, our fresh start, had turned into a complete nightmare. In the car, I pulled out my phone and saw a flood of messages from Vanessa. Jake, please come back. I'm so sorry. I love you. We can fix this. Don't throw everything away. I turned off my phone, unable to deal with her right now. As Dad drove us home, I stared out the window, wondering how my life had fallen apart so completely in just a few hours. The next few days were a blur. I stayed at my parents' house, ignoring Vanessa's constant calls and messages. I called in sick to work, unable to face the real world just yet. On the 3rd day, I finally worked up the courage to go back to our apartment. I needed clothes and, more importantly, I needed answers. As I unlocked the door, I heard shuffling inside. Vanessa was there looking like hell. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she was wearing one of my old t-shirts. Jake, she breathed, relief washing over her face. You came back. I'm just here for some clothes, I said coldly, pushing past her. She followed me to the bedroom, hovering in the doorway as I started packing a bag. Jake, please. Can we talk? I know I messed up, but I love you. We can get through this. I paused, looking at her. You know what I can't get out of my head, Vanessa? All those times you said you were working late, or going to the gym, or having girls' night. How many of those were lies? How many times were you with him? She flinched, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know. It wasn't that many times, I swear. But it was more than just the last 6 months, wasn't it? I pressed, suddenly certain. Vanessa's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I felt sick all over again. How long, Vanessa? How long have you been lying to me? Vanessa's shoulders slumped, and she sank onto the bed. It started about a year after we got married, she whispered, not meeting my eyes. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. 2 years? You've been cheating on me for 2 fucking years? She nodded miserably. It wasn't constant. There were long breaks, times when I tried to end it. But Brad, he kept pursuing me. And I was weak. I laughed bitterly. That's your excuse? You know what, Vanessa? I've been tempted too. There have been women who flirted with me, who made it clear they were interested. But I never acted on it. Because I made a vow to you. I know, she sobbed. I'm so sorry, Jake. I never meant for it to go this far. I love you, I really do. I shook my head, disgusted. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. And you certainly wouldn't have let it go on for 2 years. What can I do? She pleaded. How can I fix this? I zipped up my bag and turned to face her. You can't fix this, Vanessa. It's broken beyond repair. I want a divorce. Her face crumpled. No, Jake, please. We can go to counseling, we can work on this. But I was already walking out of the room. As I reached the front door, I turned back to her. I'll have my lawyer contact you. Don't try to reach me again. With that, I walked out, leaving behind the life I thought we had built together. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and legalities. I filed for divorce, moved in with a buddy temporarily, and tried to piece my life back together. But everywhere I went, I felt like people were whispering about me. The guy whose wife cheated with his uncle. It was humiliating. Uncle Brad tried to reach out once. He left a voicemail full of stammered apologies and excuses. I deleted it without listening to the end. Aunt Karen filed for divorce too, and I heard through the family grapevine that she was going after him for everything he had. Vanessa kept trying to contact me. Calls, texts, emails. She even showed up at my work once. Each time, her story changed slightly. One day it was all Brad's fault, he'd seduced her, manipulated her. The next, she was taking full responsibility, begging for another chance. Then she'd swing back to blaming me for working too much, for not giving her enough attention. I ignored it all as best I could, but it was wearing me down. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My work was suffering. I felt like I was losing my mind. Then, about a month after the wedding disaster, I got a text from Vanessa that made my blood run cold. Jake, we need to talk. I'm pregnant. I stared at the text message, my mind reeling. Pregnant? Was it even mine? I called her immediately, my heart pounding. She picked up on the first ring. Jake, thank God. I cut her off. Is it mine? There was a pause, then a small sob. I don't know. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Finn. What do you mean you don't know? I'm about 8 weeks along, she said, her voice shaky. It could be yours or Brad's. I'm so sorry, Jake. I sat down heavily, trying to process this new bombshell. Were you not using protection with him? We usually did, but there were a couple of times. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only had she cheated, but she'd been reckless enough to potentially get pregnant by my uncle. What are you going to do? I asked, my voice hollow. I don't know, she admitted. I wanted to tell you first. I haven't even told Brad yet. The thought of my uncle raising my child, or worse, me raising his, made me feel sick. I need time to think, I said finally. Don't do anything until we figure this out. I hung up, my head spinning. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, life threw me another curveball. What the hell was I going to do now? The next few days were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. I couldn't stop thinking about the pregnancy. Part of me hoped it was mine. I'd always wanted to be a father. But another part of me prayed it wasn't, so I could make a clean break from Vanessa and this whole mess. I finally agreed to meet Vanessa face to face to discuss the situation. We met at a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes and gossiping neighbors. Vanessa looked terrible, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, I felt a pang of concern, but I quickly pushed it aside. "Have you told Brad?" I asked as soon as we sat down. She shook her head. "No, not yet. I wanted to talk to you first." I nodded, then took a deep breath. "Vanessa, I need to know, if this baby is mine, what do you want to do?" She looked at me, hope flickering in her eyes. "If it's yours, I want us to try again. To be a family." "I know I messed up, Jake, but I still love you." I felt a surge of anger. "And if it's Brad's? What then?" Her face fell. I don't know. I can't imagine raising his child. But I also can't imagine not having it." I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. "We need to know for sure. There are prenatal paternity tests we can do. It's early, but they're pretty accurate." Vanessa nodded, tears in her eyes. "But whatever you want, Jake. I'll do anything to make this right." I looked at her, this woman I once thought I knew so well. "Vanessa, you need to understand something. Even if this baby is mine, it doesn't automatically fix us. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She started to cry silently, nodding her understanding. As I watched her, I realized that no matter what the test showed, nothing would ever be the same again. We scheduled the prenatal paternity test for the following week. The wait was excruciating. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the constant anxiety. Meanwhile, the rumor mill was working overtime. Somehow, word had gotten out about the pregnancy, and now everyone was speculating about who the father might be. The day of the test arrived. Vanessa and I met at the clinic, the tension between us palpable. As we waited for the procedure, neither of us spoke. What was there to say? After the test, the doctor told us it would take about a week to get the results. Another week of uncertainty, of not knowing whether my life was about to change forever or if I could finally close this chapter and move on. That week dragged on endlessly. I barely slept, barely ate. My friends tried to distract me, but nothing helped. Every time my phone rang, my heart leapt into my throat, thinking it might be the results. Finally, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I got the call. The doctor's voice was neutral, professional. "Mr. Thompson, we have your results. Would you like to come in to discuss them?" I gripped the phone tightly. "No, just tell me. Please." There was a pause, then, "Mr. Thompson, based on our tests, there's a 99.9% probability that you are not the father of this child." I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. It wasn't mine. The baby wasn't mine. "Thank you," I managed to choke out before hanging up. I sat there, staring at the wall, unsure whether to feel relieved or devastated. It wasn't my child, but it was my uncle's. The betrayal felt fresh all over again. I don't know how long I sat there, numb and unmoving. My phone buzzed incessantly, probably Vanessa, maybe the doctor calling back. I ignored it all. Finally, I picked up my phone and texted Vanessa, "It's not mine. Tell Brad. Don't contact me again." Then I turned off my phone, grabbed my keys, and left my apartment. I needed to clear my head, to process this new reality. I found myself at a bar, nursing a whiskey and trying to make sense of my feelings. Relief warred with disappointment, anger with a strange sense of loss. I wasn't going to be a father, at least not to this child. But I also wasn't tied to Vanessa anymore. It was over, really and truly over. As I sat there, a woman a few seats down caught my eye. She smiled sympathetically. "Rough day?" she asked. I laughed bitterly. "Rough couple of months, actually." She nodded, then held up her glass. "Well, here's to better days ahead." I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. Maybe there would be better days ahead. Maybe this was the closure I needed to finally move on. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I turned it back on without thinking. It was a text from Uncle Brad. "We need to talk. Can we meet?" I stared at the message, a new wave of anger washing over me. Did I want to hear what he had to say? Did I owe him anything? Or was it time to cut ties with that part of my family for good? I stared at Uncle Brad's message for what felt like an eternity. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to cut him out of my life completely. But another part of me needed answers, needed to understand how he could do this to me, to our family. After finishing my drink, I texted back, "Fine. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. The park near my old place." I figured a public place would be best. Less chance of me losing my cool and doing something I'd regret. The next day, I arrived at the park early, my stomach in knots. I spotted Uncle Brad sitting on a bench, looking older and more haggard than I'd ever seen him. As I approached, he stood up, his face a mask of shame and regret. "Jake, thank you for coming." I cut him off. "Save it. I'm here for answers, not apologies. How could you do this? To me? To Aunt Karen?" He sighed heavily, sitting back down. I remained standing, unable to bring myself to sit next to him. "I know there's no excuse," he began. "I was weak, selfish. Vanessa she was exciting, made me feel young again. But I never meant for it to go this far." I scoffed. 2 years, Uncle Brad. 2 years of lying, of betraying everyone who trusted you." He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "I know. I've ruined everything. My marriage, our family, and now this baby." The mention of the baby hit me like a punch to the gut. "Yeah, congratulations," I spat. "You're going to be a father again. How does it feel to have a child younger than your grandkids?" Uncle Brad flinched at my words. "I don't know what to do, Jake. Vanessa, she wants to keep it. Says she loves me. But I can't. I can't leave my family for her." I laughed bitterly. "Bit late for that, isn't it? You already left your family the moment you decided to sleep with my wife." Uncle Brad buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I know I've made a mess of everything," he said, his voice muffled. "I don't expect forgiveness, Jake. I needed you to know how sorry I am. For everything." I stood there, watching this man I'd once looked up to, now reduced to a sniveling wreck. It should have felt satisfying, but instead I just felt tired. "What are you going to do?" I asked finally. "About Vanessa and the baby?" He looked up at me, his eyes red. "I don't know. Karen's taking everything in the divorce. I can barely afford child support for a baby. And Vanessa, she's talking about us being together, but I can't. I just can't." I shook my head, disgusted. "So you're just going to abandon her? Leave her to raise your child alone?" "I don't know what else to do," he said desperately. "I've ruined everything. I can't fix it." Something in me snapped. "No, you can't fix it. But you can damn well take responsibility for your actions. That child is innocent in all this. It doesn't deserve to suffer because you couldn't keep it in your pants." Uncle Brad nodded miserably. "You're right. I know you're right. I don't know how to move forward from here." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "Figure it out. Because I'm done. Done with you, done with Vanessa, done with this whole mess. I'm moving on with my life, and I suggest you find a way to do the same." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Uncle Brad on the bench. As I left the park, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't closure, not really, but it was a start. A chance to begin again, without the lies and betrayal hanging over me. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, started hitting the gym regularly, and even began seeing a therapist to work through my trust issues. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. I heard through the grapevine that Vanessa had moved in with her parents, and Uncle Brad was living in a small apartment across town. The family was still reeling from the scandal, with people taking sides and old resentments bubbling to the surface. 6 months after that fateful wedding renewal, I ran into Viola, my sister, at a coffee shop. She hesitated before approaching me, clearly unsure of how I'd react. "Hey Jake," she said cautiously. "How are you doing?" I surprised myself by smiling genuinely. I'm doing okay, actually. Better than I have in a long time. We sat down and talked for hours. She filled me in on the family drama I'd been avoiding, and I told her about my new job and the traveling I'd been doing. As we were saying goodbye, she hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, little brother, she said. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Now, as I sit here writing this, I can't help but reflect on the roller coaster of the past year. The betrayal, the pain, the anger, it all nearly broke me. But it also taught me valuable lessons about trust, self-worth, and resilience. To anyone out there going through something similar, I want you to know that it does get better. It's not easy, and there will be days when you feel like you can't go on. But you can and you will. Trust your gut, surround yourself with people who truly care about you, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Most importantly, remember that someone else's actions don't define your worth. As for me, I'm finally ready to start dating again. I'm more cautious now, sure, but I'm also more aware of what I want and deserve in a relationship. The future is uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what it holds. Life has a funny way of teaching us lessons we never knew we needed. This whole ordeal was my crash course in resilience, self-respect, and the power of moving on. And you know what? I think I finally passed. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for watching my videos, sharing them, and supporting me along the way. Your views, comments, and likes are the driving force behind my passion to create captivating and unexpected stories. Every tale I share is more than just a plot. It's a journey of emotions, lessons, and reflections that we experience together. Your engagement brings life and soul to this channel. Thank you for sticking with me until the very end of each video because the finale of every story is where the real impact lies. I promise to continue delivering twists and turns that surprise, inspire, and resonate with your hearts.